We can put on tape.
Um, so I think we have everyone who we're expecting, so we can go ahead and get started. And I know it's been a little while. We didn't meet in August, which is understandable given how hectic summer travel is, and I know everyone was doing awesome things. So I'm very glad for
No
uh
one meets in August.
yeah, no one meets in August. It's true. Only, I mean, only Americans try to meet in August. So,
Yeah, I know. Go figure.
but yeah, glad to be back with everybody, or not everybody, but a good group of us heading into fall. And I wanted to start out before we get into the sort of um logistics and nitty gritty stuff, just reflecting a little bit on the walk because it was, even though now it feels like quite a while ago, it was a really amazing evening. And I know Rush and Councilman Lingua, I'm gonna and Jessica too, please, like, I was hoping we could just kind of go around for those who were there and just share something that stood out for you from the walk. If you can kind of take a minute to think back, to share with the group, and also something that felt relevant to our work with the town seal. And I can, if it helps, I'll just tap Councilman Lingua first.
Oh,
Sorry to do that.
oh. What is this? Age before beauty thing, huh? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Uh, what I'm struck with about Riversdale is that it's got an incredibly complex history. Um, from when the Styers first came over to then Rosalie's marriage into the Calvert family, the fact that she still onto the property, she held onto the property, um, the slaves that worked there, the time that the family had the property onwards, how it evolved, how it changed hands, who came afterwards. Um, One of the underlying themes that I saw coming out of all of that, all the the whole spectrum of what occurred there, um, is this underlying theme of very strong, determined women who, in one way or another, were going to find a way to, despite what adversities were put up in front of them, um, they were going to determine how they were going to live their lives. Um, that's the one thing, between be it Rosalie, be it Frances Plummer, be it any of the folks that came after. I believe it was Hattie Caraway, who was a senator, who became a senator and lived there at one point because her husband um, passed away, and at that time, that's who would take the seat. There's just there's a lot there, and how essentially the acquisition of the property by the Riverdale Park Company and the surrounding lands, because they were looking to develop because of the rail line that was there, and they were seeing close to DC, Great Plates put this, to set up a community there and to build houses and develop. Um, it just it takes that building, um, begins a new chapter for it. Yet, and at that same time, what wasn't really happening then, that's happening now, is just a recognition of what occurred before at that property, and really reconciling, for lack of, of another term, reconciling as we are today, the past that was there, um, with how we as a community, we as well, locally the community, and we as just even just as humans, look to move forward. So I mean, there's a lot there, and I think unless we're all gathering in person and having food and drinks over this, because this could be a
Yeah,
very long
it
conversation.
could.
So
It really could.
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. I guess I'll just prompt you to if anything comes to mind, and I think what you said already touches on this, but relevance to the town seal, anything specifically that about the process that they've gone through to kind of bring forward some of this history, or just the place itself that feels relevant to our work.
Um, I think a lot of the folks, at Maryland Park and Planning, and essentially they've done a great deal since the time that the place was open in 1993, or when along with the Riversdale Historical Society. They have worked in a number of ways to be able to present the story of both the Stires, Calvert family, as well as the Plumbers. And this is Maya is taking that now and evolving that storytelling of the Plummer family with the Stires and the Calvert family, and more about that interaction and what was occurring there. The one thing about the house is that the idea to make it a museum, to be able to remember all that had occurred there, uh, came from residents who lived in town, literally lived behind, some like right around the house, the mansion, and decided this has been used as office space by Park and Planning. They're moving out. We need to be looking at this as something that um, allows these stories to be told. And it was their efforts back in late 80s, early 90s, to get this going, to form the Riversdale Historic Society, to make that happen. It's again, without the mansion being established there, without this large, the tract of land that was purchased by the Stires family, um, there's not a Riverdale Park later to come from that. The fact that essentially part of the agreement that was reached with the family to run a rail line through the property was, okay, but you need to have a commuter train stop there at least once a day. They weren't just that they put that in there, said, you want to build on my land? You have a commuter train that stops at least once a day in each direction. And that was part of the agreements, which still stands today. Um, that's that was that's the one thing, that probably, I don't know if it was the one thing, but that was one of the other attributes that when Riverdale Park Company from New York starts looking at this property and they realize, they got a commuter train that stops there. because if it was just a straight through pass through of a freight line, um, they would have probably had a much harder time trying to get a stop put in. But being that there was one already established, um, made it a much more attractive opportunity for it. And that was negotiated by the family back in first half of the 19th century, I believe. So, I mean, when you look at what do I see on there when I see that, on the top part of, the mansion, um, I see a lot of things there. I see the fact that, at one point it was a place where essentially you had a European family, member of the gentry, that owned this property and had slaves. I see that. I see that uh, it was a house that later went on and allowed others who served this country, in the Senate and otherwise, um, lived. It was home to them. At one point it was also the office for park and planning, which has done over time work on behalf of the community to open up facilities to everybody and to not have them restricted to only certain people, and to make them available for everybody. Um, it's it's a very complex emblem, for lack of a better term. I'm trying to think. When you see it on the town seal, it's a very complex emblem, and how but it was what was chosen at the time to essentially be emblematic of the story and the history of Riversdale. Um, it can be seen as just a plantation. It can be seen, as any number of singular things. Uh, but with the history that it's had from early 19th century to up into the later part of the 20th century, in terms of its use, and now that it's a museum telling the story of those of that earlier time, um, and the years ensuing. Uh, it's if anything, it's all of those things, and it's the start of this community. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of comes to that. On a footnote, I would just a lot of these things that I'm referring to, these things that, um, and how I came to know about was, when I first got here, I got a copy of the book that had come out in the mid '90s, to mark the 75th anniversary, about the story of the town. And it was called Mansion and Municipality, the Riverdale story. Or I think Gesundheit. Gesundheit. Um, and I know there are copies floating around somewhere. Um, and if anyone wants to grab a hold of one and just kind of peruse through that, I'd recommend it. The other one too is another good read is, the letters, Mistress of Riversdale, that about the letters that, Rosalie wrote. Um, that's a good read as well.
Nice.
So sorry about. I know it's a bit long-winded, but like
No
it's a
worries.
really complex. It's a complex building, and like how, I mean, how do we tell? How do we? And again, what it kind of comes down to. I would just say this: the people who made the seal at that time wanted to give recognition to that story, And the question before all of us is that something, mostly for you folks, um, is that what you want the town seal to do? And that's really what that's what this group can work to towards an answer to that, um, through all that we've that's been talked about, planned in terms of getting input and all. I would say that's one of the questions is, what is it that the group is looking for the town seal to say about the community? The previous seal it essentially represents the town's history. Is that the direction the group wants to go? That's the group's decision.
That's a great question to uplift from this conversation. So thank you for that, Councilman.
The loaded question you threw at me.
A critical one though, for sure.
Yeah.
Unless anybody wants to respond, maybe Rush, I'll pass it to you next.
Sure. I think Councilman Langua hit on a lot of really great points. So it's a tough act to follow. But I'll say that one thing I'm always struck by, especially during the spring and during the summer when I go on my walks around town and go to Riversdale House Museum, is the grounds and the gardens and just how beautiful they always look. And I always think about that kind of in contrast with the complicated history of the space. And I was struck during our walk by Maya's ability and the work that she's been doing through the Park and Planning Commission as the executive director to tell a fuller story in a way that I think hadn't always been told. When I was growing up, or even when I was younger and worked at Park and Planning, those conversations weren't happening. And just knowing like the history of the Plumbers and the personal journal and narrative that he wrote, and later his niece resurrected and became famous really for telling the story of how enslaved people lived in this area. I think it's all really important work, and so for me, it goes from being a place where it could have a negative connotation, the structure of the museum, to being a place of learning and of reflection and of telling a lot of times some hard truths. And so I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, was that the work that's been done over the past few years is making Riversdale a much better place to visit and learn, and makes it, for me, something to be very proud of as a resident of Riverdale Park. And so that was a big takeaway for me from that walkthrough, was just that work that's being done, and then that history that I did not know about, and that I learned very recently from the work that's been done. And even the portrait of Adam Plummer that was done by, I think, Chanel Compton, but it was the first portrait of an African American, of a formerly enslaved person, to be shown in that space. I just thought that was just very important and prolific and moving, to just really shine light on the people that built and maintained the space that we all enjoy as a community to this day. Just to kind of focus on them even a little bit in the broader narrative of Maryland history and the Calvert family, and all the things that make Marylanders proud and has a long history in the state. Just kind of focus on the people that actually built and maintained that space for the first time last year, 2 years ago. That's jarring, but also I think really important work. And that makes me proud. And so that was one of my big takeaways from that experience.
Nice. And yeah, anything you want to lift up in particular, like to carry forward in our conversations about the town seal?
I think the main thing is, for me, there's always this conversation around, what do you do with these historical things that have complicated paths, whether they be monuments, whether they be building structures. I spent a part of the summer in Berlin, where they also continue to deal with a complicated past, and they spent a lot of time kind of recontextualizing and a lot of times erasing history. And I think one of the things that the threads that we need to cross here in this country and as a community is, not erasure, but maybe recontextualization or painting fuller pictures. And I think that was the big takeaway for this bill for me, was realizing how important, or I guess reinforcing my belief in how important the museum and the house is as a symbol for this town, despite that complicated history. And what do we need to do on this committee and as residents to recontextualize that, or maybe paint a fuller picture about what the town means today. I think Councilmember Richard said something the other day about, giving some roses to those who toiled on the land, either literally or metaphorically. Like it left more questions than answers. I'll say that, but I think it gave me, it kind of reinforced in me the importance of the house as a symbol for this town and for this community, and how do we kind of move forward with this new design or whatever it's going to be with that in mind.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree, and I think that's a great point. Yeah, Jessica, do you want to share any observations from the walk?
There's not a whole lot more that I can share. I think that Councilman Lingua and Rush really spoke to the things that I was thinking of. But one thing that I left Riversdale with in mind is just that there's a way to incorporate Riversdale and that complex history into the town seal. It was just clear to me that this is important to our community. Telling a more fuller story of Riversdale is important. So that was just something that resonated with me, that we can still include it in an appropriate way.
Great. Anyone else want to ask any questions, reflect on? I know, if you weren't there, but maybe if folks have visited on their own and want to share thoughts, I open the floor.
Yeah, just having, been there before and been in the community and all that good stuff, and definitely having been there for the Adam Francis Plummer mosaic unveiling. Yeah, I don't know where else to go with that other than I agree with what everybody said. I think it's important to have it referenced some way in the seal, and as other folks have eloquently said, in a way that pays homage to the full history of the place. So.
Melissa, anything you want to add or comment on?
No, I mean, I think everyone's already touched on absolutely everything that I could have, not having been at the tour that you guys were on, but knowing some of the history. I think again, just co-signing that telling the full story and including the complex history and not running away from it, I think is really, really important.
I was very struck by the visit, not knowing as much about the town history as most of you. You know, I found it really fascinating. I think Maya did a really amazing job of offering all of the complexity, not shying away from any of the complexity. I was struck by her, she, I think, described the reframing or the kind of recontextualizing the work at one point as kind of moving away from the sort of architectural and built history of the space to focus more on the human narratives that were unfolding at the house. And I found that really compelling. I think to me that seemed like a useful framework for thinking about the town seal. Not to say that necessarily translates to a person's face or something like that, but I think those personal stories and narratives are really powerful. So I liked the emphasis on that versus the sort of lifting up of the significance of the house or things of that nature. Fascinating as that stuff is. I was also struck by the her descriptions of how big the estate used to be and the fact that there are lots of things in the town in proximity to the house that are kind of on the ground, what used to be the grounds of the estate, and kind of thinking about its relevance to the kind of geography of the town, beyond just the footprint of the house itself. And then Rush, I'm glad you brought up the garden, because I thought that was we didn't actually go into the garden, but Maya talked a bit about it, and she was sharing that the person who was managing the garden was doing a lot of work to kind of cultivate plants that reflected the complexity of the history of the house. So, growing foods that would have been grown by native peoples who lived on the land, growing food that would have come over from Africa with enslaved people. And I thought that was really interesting, and then reflected in they had a food historian kind of making these photorealistic dishes, and that again was not just the sort of formal feast that the family would have had, but also what the enslaved people would have been eating and what the indentured servants would have been eating. So yeah, I thought the garden definitely struck me as an interesting avenue for telling the story. Also, just the fact that it's a living space, it is growing, it's constantly changing, like that, just that idea seemed powerful to me. So yeah, I think it was an excellent visit. It was so fascinating, and definitely, like, I think will enrich our conversations going forward. So awesome. I've taken notes on everything you all shared, so we can carry that forward into future conversations. And thank you everyone for being so thoughtful about it.
Great. Thank you.
So I wanted to just spend a little time. Jessica actually did the legwork of figuring out exactly what our meeting dates month to month will look like if we continue with our current cadence. I just wanted to take some time as a group to kind of look at where we are with the schedule and kind of what our timeline looks like right now. And just kind of brainstorm together how we want to move forward. And I think, we've been going a bit more slowly than we planned initially, and I think that's totally fine. We can work with that, but I just wanted to sort of get the group's input on where we are and see if the schedule still makes sense to everyone. So I am going to share my screen. And I know that won't help some of you, but I will also read aloud what we're looking at. So first of all, I'm just going to go month by month with kind of where we are on the scope of work timeline. This is my proposed adjustment based on kind of where we are right now. So heading into October, we had talked about, in addition to kind of research and information gathering, hosting a series of 4 focus groups that would be with different stakeholder groups. So we had talked about some categories of stakeholders that we talked about. We talked about talking with the House Museum staff and leadership, with youth from the town, with legacy residents, newcomers, and also with Spanish-speaking neighbors. So that is kind of where we are. That's like the step that we're moving into in October. And I think it would be good to spend some time talking about if these are still the sort of categories of stakeholders we're interested in speaking with, or if there are other groups that have emerged that we'd like to talk to, if we want to, you know, add more focus groups, do fewer, etc. And I'd also love to know kind of what folks' interest is in participating in that, or whether it's, you know, a preference to have the group kind of talk about and plan, and then NDC could run those. So I'd love to sort of hear from you all, you know, what level of involvement you'd like to have. Then in November, I'm proposing shifting to November, the public panel, where we would share some of the conversations we've had as a group, what we've learned from these conversations out in the community, these focus group conversations, and what I'm hoping can come out of the focus groups is really identifying some core kind of design guidelines and values around the town seal that will help us frame that RFQ in a way that will get us a really exciting and, you know, proposal that is commensurate with the complexity of the history that we're talking about. So the public panel right now would happen in November. That would feed into the drafting and circulation of the RFQ, which would happen in December. Looking to have an artist selected in January, with the design process beginning in February. March, hosting a public meeting for feedback on concept designs, and then by May, a public presentation of the seal proposal and a draft report. Any responses, thoughts, questions to that proposed timeline or the components of that scope?
So my question, and I guess this is getting into like nitty gritty details, for the focus groups in the public panel, I guess, you know, the public panel will be addressing some of the themes that come up during the focus groups, or sharing information and getting more feedback from the community. But for the focus groups, you know, who's responsible for framing those? I'm just thinking from a timeline perspective, as we're almost in October. And so reaching out to folks and having well-formed questions and focus for them as we're discussing this with them. I'm just curious, you know, is it realistic? Like, do you think that we can actually do outreach, set times and dates for 4 different focus groups in October, and have a well-crafted approach to those meetings so that we get the most out of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it depends on everyone's comfort level with a couple things. One is, you know, if the group is interested in potentially kind of speeding up the cadence of our meetings. But another option would be to, you know, just gauge people's comfort level with my kind of moving forward on doing that legwork of kind of planning what those conversations look like, sharing that with the group via email and kind of getting buy-in that way so that we can, obviously, we're not going to be planning the focus groups tonight. There's not going to be time. So in order to have something meaningful happen, it would require me kind of moving forward with things and getting feedback from the group. So I also, Jessica and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and I had kind of pitched the idea of, splitting our working group into potentially even smaller, like, pairs of folks who might be interested in kind of meeting independently with me. If anyone's particularly interested in the focus group or in the RFQ, kind of meeting independently to work with me on moving that piece forward a bit faster. So those are all options. I think if the group is really committed to wanting to have a full hand in designing the focus groups and planning them, and we want to stick with the current cadence, then October is probably not realistic. However, if we're sort of on the other end of the spectrum and it's okay for me to move forward with, NDC staff support to get those kind of planned and approved by you all, or somewhere in between, I think we can, probably aim for the end of October. But it's a great question, and I appreciate you asking. I think reality check with timeline is always critical. So
I've in a previous job, I did some of this work, and I always have timeline questions. I always have timeline.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, any thoughts on those different options from you all?
Yeah, I like the option of doing async work with you, of having you and your team with your expertise of having done these kinds of processes before with communities, bringing some ideas our way for async approval versus meetings. I love the idea of being able to include members of our committee who want to be involved and telling us, like, where we can plug in and be the most useful. And also just so that somebody, from our committee always has some deeper level of involvement. I think it's smart. So yeah, I think it sounds like a late October round of focus groups sounds doable if we work in that way. But I'm curious to hear what other committee members think.
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Go ahead, Rush.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say I agree with what was just said. I think one of the reasons we went with Neighborhood Design Center was because of the expertise that you all bring to the table, and I think the idea of just kind of keeping us in the loop on what's going on, and then maybe breaking up into smaller groups, based on expertise or where we want to participate in which capacity of this process makes a lot of sense in terms of just keeping the ball moving forward. And so I agree with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've brought on neighborhood design. You have experience in this, they have experience in this. I'm comfortable with, if you're willing to take the lead on it and do that, I'm comfortable with that. And if you're finding you're probably looking at an additional need for like 30, 45, or 60 days, I don't see that as a concern. It's kind of what I've said before. If we're feeling it's going to take a little longer, okay, fine. Just make sure that we're being thorough about it and we're comfortable with how we're being thorough about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with the consensus that sounds like the best way to go.
Great. That is good to hear. And I think, again, that will rely on just, again, we can move into talking through who might want to have more of a hand in that focus group planning, who I can reach out to set up some meeting times in the interim. And also just, again, kind of getting feedback on materials over email, you know, from the group. But it sounds like everyone is on board to do that. So that's great. Any other questions regarding the timeline?
I know at one point we had ping-ponged around the idea as a committee of, let me see, yeah, so the public meeting for feedback on concept designs, great. And then the public presentation of sealed proposal and draft report. So public meeting for feedback on concept designs, it feels like there's probably a step in between there of us getting the feedback and then us determining what to do with the feedback. I think that's implied, but that might take, depending on what the feedback is and what kind of conversations we need to have as a committee, we should probably just plan on meeting in April, or even, you know, in March, adding like a second meeting in March immediately after the public meeting for feedback to kind of determine what our next steps need to be based on that public feedback in order to get to, you know, that May public presentation of a sealed proposal.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just talk through again, I sort of laid out what we want to be doing. This is I sort of laid this out assuming we were moving forward as a full group, and I think this will change a bit, but you know, in October, whether or not it happens on the date that on the date of our meeting, some of this will happen prior to it, but identifying the stakeholders for the focus groups, planning the engagement questions for the groups, inviting stakeholders to the groups, hosting those conversations, all in October. In November, both reviewing feedback from the focus groups. This seems like something that would be useful to do as a group, whether we're able to do it on a Zoom meeting or if it has to happen, you know, via email. I think that seems like an important thing for everyone to weigh in on. And then talking through a proposal for how this public panel looks, hosting the panel. Then in December, again, I think feels important for the whole group to review a draft of the RFQ and approve the circulation of the RFQ. So again, something that we can, you know, again, these are the times that if we continue our monthly cadence, we'll meet. I think we may need to do some adjusting of, again, whether if we want to have a Zoom conversation, we might need to amend the dates a bit just to keep things moving. But again, also possible to do stuff over email.
Yeah.
In January, we would be reviewing that response to the RFQ and selecting an artist. And then by February, reviewing early design concepts, and again, making a selection and proposal. So I think if it works for you all, like maybe just putting these dates on your calendar for now would be a good way to move forward so that we've got our meeting schedule and kind of general work plan laid out for the next 6 months. Does that sound reasonable to you all?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
It does. I am wondering if we want to shift our meetings to earlier in the month, considering that right now we're meeting later in the month, which has worked for us for where we've been in process thus far. But if we're planning on doing, public panels and focus groups, it might be easier if we talked earlier in the month and like, so that there's still plenty of time left in the month to act on the work. Same with
For
the
sure.
RFQ, like we want to get the RFQ out before any of the winter holidays to have
For
people
sure.
actually be able to devote some time and attention to it. I just know, it gets harder as we get into like late November, late December.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think that's a great suggestion. So if folks are okay with starting next month, pushing our meeting time a bit earlier, so we'll meet again basically in 2 weeks, more or less. Is that all right with everyone?
Meryl, I just wanted to point out, like, what week are we looking at? Because the second week is the week prior, and we have already another committee that meets that night too.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure we kept in mind that we do have those other groups that are meeting
That's
regularly
Green
as well.
Team, isn't it?
It is, yes.
They're third Tuesday or second Tuesday?
They're the second Tuesday. I think they're the second Tuesday. Let me double check. You know what? They've changed their meeting schedule this month, so
Yeah,
let me
it's
double
kind of
check.
shifted around a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, like, if we run into things like that and we really feel like it's important to have a meeting that week, I mean, are people open to shifting to a Wednesday, or just like looking at calendars versus
I'm okay shifting to a Wednesday, shifting to a Thursday, whatever's gonna work.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay.
that's me. So
Yeah.
I know I do, I do meet with the Green Team. So I do have that, and I believe that's kind of been between, like, usually it's been the second Tuesday. So
Yeah.
We
I'm
could
wondering-
look at like, for instance, October, let's see, 4th, or
Yeah.
maybe the beginning of, let's see. Unfortunately, I'm going to be away the very beginning of that second week.
Okay. 4th, 11th, 12th, however, 4th, 5th, 11th, 12th, however you want to,
Yeah.
I know the following week, the 15th and 16th, there's a fall conference for Maryland Municipal League. I'll be at that. Tuesday's the final day. I can't remember if what's planned for the evening. Usually it's a dinner. I can do without that. So
Another option is we could just, for the sake of jarring us into the right flow, we could just meet next Tuesday, and whoever can come comes. I can bring to that some materials centered on the focus groups, just to talk through and share, and then follow up with whoever wants to be sort of part of the focus group working team. And that will be on an early in the month schedule. I don't know how people feel about that.
I can meet next Tuesday.
Okay, cool.
So I hope, but
Rush, does that work for you at all?
Rush, when do you leave for Italy again?
Yep. I leave on Saturday. I will be in Italy next Tuesday. I get back next Tuesday.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
it
So I'll
sounds
miss that
like
one, but I'm more than happy to follow up. And then moving forward, it should be fine for me, the earlier schedule, at least until January, when I figure out what my course schedule looks like for spring semester, which I still haven't gotten yet. But I'm willing to be very flexible and accommodating to the group on this.
awesome. Cool. Well, so I'm happy to do that. I think it'll give us a little extra momentum, kick us off into the next chapter of work. So why don't we plan to regroup next Tuesday, and everyone who can join will be there, and we'll continue to update everyone. We'll record the meetings, and I can send out notes just to keep people in the loop. But that'll be great because then again, to your point, Melissa will be starting off these months with conversations, which I think is a great idea. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and Jessica, thank you for figuring out all those dates every month, and I'll go redo that exercise and then just send calendar invites for the next, I think we have 7 meetings here. And again, like, you know, we can be responsive. If we need to pivot, we'll do it. Yeah. And then in terms of the working group question, I had identified, like, the focus group seems like an obvious one, the planning of the drafting of the RFQ, another one, talking through the process for reviewing submissions feels like a third. So does anyone on the call have a sort of natural inclination toward one of those 3 activities that they would like to kind of volunteer to participate off meeting cadence with me on, or any strong feelings?
Yeah, so I'm super interested in the focus groups and the
Awesome.
community panel conversation. So I would love to be a part of those conversations.
Great.
I mean, I'm interested in all of it, but, but most immediately useful. I would be really
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and just say I could be helpful with all of them, but the review process, you know, stuck out to me. So I would like to volunteer for that. But yes, I like to be in the loop on all the developments.
Terrific. Anyone else?
Well,
I could just assign people too if they want.
trying to figure what, you know, what I'd be able to do. I'm thinking writing an RFQ. I have no idea how that's done. And, you know, I don't think I'm going to become a pro from Dover on that anytime soon. Gosh, probably would want to probably help out with like review process, like what step, you know, how that's going to all work out.
Okay.
We could talk about that. Okay. I'm thinking probably, or I could probably be of help on that.
Great.
I'm interested in working with the focus groups. Depending on how they shake out schedule wise, I'm not sure about my availability to work on them, and certainly don't want to hold them up. But of the group, that's probably where I can be the most helpful.
Terrific. Okay. Great. So I have my names of people to bug in the next couple of days about the focus group. So thank you. And you know, of course, we'll keep everybody in the loop as we're developing what these conversations look like. But that's great. And I feel like that gives me, you know, a little bit more clarity on kind of who I can tap to kind of move things forward between our monthly meetings. So thank you for that offer of your time. During our remaining time, I'd love to just kind of jump into those stakeholder groups that we started to identify. I think, Jessica, you mentioned that prior to my joining, there was some early conversation about stakeholders, and I think maybe these groups that I have from the scope of work, you know, might be a useful starting place. And it would be great to figure out, does 4 focus groups feel like the right number? Do these groups feel like the right ones? Who's missing? And yeah, you guys are the experts on your place. So I would love to get your input on where we should be focusing our attention for these conversations. So just to reiterate, and I'll share my screen again, um, the scope of work identifies the House Museum staff and leadership, youth, legacy residents, newcomers, and Spanish-speaking neighbors.
Newcomers. I take it when you talk, when you're talking about the Riversdale House Museum staff and leadership, that encompasses, I know it's encompassing Park and Planning Commission, in general, and it's specifically staff there at Riversdale. Does that also encompass, Riversdale Historic Society?
That's a good question. I don't think I read it that way. So we can add Historic Society.
Yeah, RHS would, I think, probably want to be one of the stakeholders involved in it. I mean, they're kind of they work in conjunction with the house. They're a little bit independent from Park and Planning. It's more like, and you know, the person to contact on that would be Patrick Gossett, who happens also to, would fall under being a legacy resident as well, even though he doesn't live in town anymore. He did grow up here a time ago. So
How do you spell his last name?
Gossett, I believe, or it may just be one T. I can check and get back to you on that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Oh, you can get you an email. I'll get you an email address too.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
You are very welcome. So am I, in terms of like when you're talking about Riversdale House Museum and staff
Mhm.
and leadership, is that encompassing other staff who are also responsible for the museum within Park and Planning?
I think it can.
Okay. Um, I'm throwing this out to the whole group. And I think I already know what the answer is. Being that Charles Benedict Calvert was the founder of Maryland Agricultural College and granted the land for the college to be built, that now being the University of Maryland College Park, which is a land grant college. Thoughts on including them in a focus group?
You talking about the administration or students or both?
I'm not sure exactly. You know, I don't know if it's the administration. I'm not sure if it's something. I think probably one of the people we could ask about this is because he does also sit on the Board of Regents, is Patrick Gossett. Yeah, the guy, I mean, tell you what, talk about the hometown kid, making good. Right up there with Pat Prangley and Pat Timmons, um, and others, but there are a bunch of hometown kids that have made good here.
I
Um,
think my question for including anybody from college, from UMD College Park, would be like how close are they to Riverdale Park? Like not geographically, obviously, but like as part of the community, because that's I think what we were trying to narrow the focus groups to are segments of our direct community.
yeah, and that's what I was thinking also as well. It's even as much as is that the university is intrinsically connected with
Right.
Riversdale when it comes to the town seal, uh, probably that would be a bit of a reach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking that similarly, that, ultimately, it's either a place of work for people or for the people that live on campus. Of course, they're actually from, finger quotes for those who can't see, somewhere else. Like I work remotely in my job, and the office, which I've never been to, is in Alexandria. I don't really feel like I'm part of the Alexandria community. And also, who knows, they might try to come back with wanting a seal that says Town of Greater College Park, which we don't want.
Could you make the seal golden black?
I mean, something to consider that we've done in other contexts is coming up with a very simple digital survey that has questions related to the town seal that we could circulate to that kind of, like, if focus groups are more kind of inner circle, like who's really invested in Riverdale Park, who's like sort of needs to be engaged in a deep way, then maybe there's that other tier of people who might have a more tangential relationship but might still have useful input. So we could think of doing something like that would just be another mode of engagement. And I know, like, in Hyattsville, we've posted, like, Hello Hyattsville has hosted, articles about different engagement work we're doing with links to surveys. So, we could do something like that.
Okay. I think, in terms of what you're saying, it's like anything that's gonna like bring this to a cognition level that is really gonna like get a broad and varied input is is well worth it. And I mean,
Yeah.
if it's repetitively done, however, it's like, you know, if we're if we're trying if we have to find a way to approach this like, you know, selling Coca-Cola, and just getting it in front of folks all the, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we want to do that kind of just combination of, again, like letting people know it's happening, but also making room for feedback, I think a digital survey seems like a really good tool. And it's just super easy to circulate, easy for people to do on their phone, on their computer, whatever.
And I think that's because for a while we were talking to you about like, do we want input from small business owners in town? Do we want input from the volunteer fire department? Do we want input like different sections where maybe they're not right, depending on what we're looking for the focus groups, they might not fit in the focus group space, but they might be fantastic folks to field a digital survey to.
Yep,
Cool.
absolutely.
Okay. So I like the idea of breaking out these two categories then. Like, who do we want to engage, who we want to send a digital survey to, who might be a little bit more distant or less of a priority for us in the conversation. but who we really want to make sure we make space for their feedback and also make sure they know what's going on. And then, you know, again, what are the 4 groups that we feel like really want that more personal, kind of in-depth conversation style of engagement?
Okay. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the kind of groups that we have identified right now under focus groups? So House Museum staff and leadership, youth, legacy residents, newcomers, and Spanish speaking neighbors.
Do you think we want to put some parameters on like what does newcomer mean? As far as like what does that mean in like our targeting of these folks? Like, is this you've been in Riverdale Park for under 5 years? Is it under 3? Like, what does it mean to be a newcomer? I think is would help us as far as like what kind of I think what we're trying to get at here is that folks who are newer to the community are going to have perhaps a different perspective than people who are legacy, and both are valuable. And so figuring out like what are the themes for people that are new to the community, like why do they come here, like what are the things that are really important to them about the community that they have now chosen to be a part of. And then, you know, legacy residents, obviously, like these are people that have been here for a long time and choose over and over again to stay here. Like, what are the themes and the important things that they view in the community? And then I would be really curious to see like what are the intersections between those two. I mean, for all of these, right? For all of these different focus groups, but specifically when we're targeting and we're looking to bring in a focus group of newcomers, what are the parameters on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think under 5 seems like a reasonable amount of time where you're new, but you may still have a clear investment in a place. So that's sort of just off the cuff, my instinct, but I'm open to what other people think on that one for sure.
Yeah, I think 3 to 5 is kind of we might want to go 5 just because of the lockdown phase of the pandemic meant that it was a little different for folks. And so 5 would mean that people moved here, you know, before or during or after, right? But that you're not hitting, you could hit people that had some community involvement perhaps before and experienced a different disruption in how they interact with community during that lockdown period, and then the after.
Yeah, that for sure. I think that's a great idea. While we're on the subject of newcomer versus legacy, thoughts from you all on the best way to identify these two groups? Is there kind of a like we have like Live Baltimore and Baltimore that kind of helps people find a neighborhood? Any kind of groups like that might be able to guide us to folks who are newer to?
I mean, I know where the Redfin signs are in my neighborhood. I can just, they're the ones that have recently come down. I can just knock on doors and say, hey, I'm kidding. I know that's not like the most efficient way of going about, but I wonder, I mean, we've got social media presence and we've got the prior as well. And I'm wondering, you know, for a quick turn on something like this though, where we're looking to get focus groups together in October and we're almost in October, it feels like social would be the quickest way for us to gather some folks, but I'm wondering if there's other ways of reaching out to. I mean, I know when my wife and I moved here, we got a ton of mail. We were clearly on some lists of like, these people just moved here, not necessarily from the town of Riverdale Park, but we got a ton of stuff from like neighboring organizations. And so I don't, you know, I'm not sure if anybody with the town has information there.
The town gets a quarterly list from ESTAT of properties that have transferred. We can go back and look at like the most recent couple of lists and at least do like a direct mailing of like the flyer or more information about this. to those people. A lot of times we don't have email addresses or things of that nature. But there are some, areas in town where, people are kind of coming and going. The newer developments, new homes that are built, those are some things that we might be able to help with.
Nice. And then in terms of social media, do you all, is there like a robust kind of next door group for Riverdale Park? Is it more on Facebook? Like, what are the platforms people are on?
Good question.
I hear chuckling, but
Yeah, no, it's me. It's a good
how
question.
to interpret it?
The one thought that's running in my mind, as the mayor always says, the town crier. I mean, and sure, I mean, putting something in every issue of the upcoming town criers, not a bad idea, be it, what gets mailed out or what's available on the town website. Because there's also a digital version of that too.
Mhm.
Um,
That would be a great place to put like a QR code or link to the digital survey too.
absolutely, absolutely. Any number of ways that you want to get folks to doing the survey, or be that through that, or any other thing. I recommend it. Just,
Cool. That's
I
great.
mean, again, like we're, like we're, uh, promoting Coca-Cola or something like that. Just frequent and just steady.
Mhm.
Just like putting that out there, so a lot of people just become aware of it, and you get that cognition going, and so much so that folks are responding to it.
Awesome.
So be that, I know we have the town website, we have a town Facebook page, I believe we have a town Twitter page. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Barnes.
We have an Instagram account.
There
We
you
have
go.
Yeah, we have official town communication platforms, so that would all go out through those. The town crier is like a very important aspect of the of our communication platform, but it's certainly some things that it can only be done monthly, right? So the fresh stuff and the timely stuff needs to go out on social media. We also have Town Announce, which is like
Yep.
a little bit of an email listserv, and that's connected. Some folks share things on Town Talk, and then I know things get shared on Nextdoor. So I think pushing things out through the official platforms, and then if members of the committee could like share the posts that the town's doing, and then make sure that it just gets out to anything in the neighborhood. Like I know some communities use Nextdoor. I'm just not sure how much of that is used in Riverdale Park, but like focusing on the town's official communication platforms first as like the main push out, and then if everybody else could like share on their own individual personal pages and things like that, I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
I could tell you I got on the Nextdoor list for our area, finger quotes again. And it just goes to my junk mail now because it's all posts about Brooklyn.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah, our folks aren't on Nextdoor, it seems.
Okay.
Yeah, I only got on Nextdoor because my wife and I found a dog in our front yard, and that was like after we hit up Lynn Animal Hospital and some other places. That was the only place that we could think of that like it might get out more. And the person we connected with the person who lost their dog on Nextdoor, and the only reason that they had joined Nextdoor that day as well to find their lost dog. So it was like both of us joining specifically for that specific purpose, and everything else, to your point, has gone to junk for me because it's not as relevant, it seems. But
Okay.
I was wondering also if we would want to, if there's spaces like at Town Center Market or other where like we could put a flyer out or put something like an announcement up about, if you're interested in participating in a focus group, like here's an email or here's information. Or I'm wondering if there's some, like if there are places in town that would be willing, or like Riverdale Park Station, like
Yes.
there would be places where we can put flyers up about, for recruiting purposes for focus groups.
So the town has bulletin boards, like little boards in each ward, 2 in each ward. We also, when we're trying to get the word out, we typically put things at the train station, some of the businesses around the farmers market specifically, because there's a lot of foot traffic. We also do flyers in all the multifamily buildings, trying to get that out to folks as much as possible. We put flyers at Megamart, anywhere that'll pretty much let us put a flyer. We kind of identified some of our partners who will allow that. So we're happy to help get that out in any way.
I think reaching out to Riverdale Elementary, as well as, well, I know Riverdale Elementary. I was thinking also College Park Academy, but I know that you have students from really across Prince George's coming there, where Riverdale Park Elementary is a little more is considerably more local.
Mm.
Um,
I mean, another thing to consider as we're talking about the focus group specifically is just like what number we want to cap those at. I mean, again, I'm imagining these as, real conversations. And, to my mind, like really more than 10 or 12 people starts to become difficult to do that. So I think I'm not super concerned about getting folks to, kind of meeting our goals number wise for the focus groups. But I do think it's worth, we may want to set number goals. We can totally do that around like digital surveys. So if we want to talk to 20 youth, but we, only 12 of them are going to come to a focus group, and maybe the other 8 are people we do digital surveys with or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Melissa, I think even smaller. Yeah, I think 12 is pushing it, especially with youth, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like 12 youth. That's going to be,
Yeah.
how many hours do we have? It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's like, but it can make conversations not be as focused for a focus group.
Gotcha.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, but again, I think if we do this digital survey, which I would imagine will also have just kind of basic contextual information about the project, that's something that we can just push out indefinitely. And the great thing about using something like Google Forms is that it crunches all the, data for you, and it's not a lot of legwork for, I mean, the number of like paper surveys I have from park observation I did last week that I need to input into, the computer. It's a lot of
Daunting.
it's a lot of work processing that. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Google Forms is the best. I know, it's so great. Councilman Lingo, were you going to say something? Sorry, I
No,
didn't
I
mean
was
to
just
talk.
saying you're talking about those paper forms and having to go through them, and you're saying it's kind of somewhat, I'm like, daunting.
Oh, daunting. Yeah. Daunting is, yes, daunting is the right word.
Okay.
And just time consuming.
Yeah.
I think with the digital survey, we want to make sure that we have it in English and in Spanish.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. We can translate it over at NDC. I don't know if you guys have someone you work with at the town level, Jessica, who does that for you all.
I'm sorry, Meryl, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Melissa just mentioned the idea of which I think is a great one, of having the survey in Spanish as well. We have someone at NDC who can do it, but just curious if you guys have someone on staff at the city who could do it too. Okay, cool.
Yeah, definitely. We do everything in English and in Spanish. So all the flyers, all of that would be in English and Spanish.
Great. That's really great. In terms of the Spanish speaking community, any thoughts on, outside of what we've already talked about, like basic social media, any thoughts on good avenues for reaching those folks?
So we've been working to develop some like community ambassadors, folks who are tied into the Spanish speaking community. And I have a couple of people that we might be able to like reach out to help, kind of give that validity to the process that we're working through. So that might be one way. We also work closely with the parent group at Riverdale Elementary. That's another group that'll help us reach out. And then we also have, we have primarily Spanish speakers, or actually a large number of Spanish speakers that utilize a couple of our programs. So we could use just direct emails or mailings through that list as well. So those are just a couple of things that we might be able to really pinpoint the input that we need from Spanish speakers.
Perfect. That's great. Awesome. Well, we're just, oh, sorry, was someone talking? No, okay. We're just about at 8:30. So what I am going to propose is I'm going to just take what I will send out the invites to future meetings with just a few bullet points about what we hope to do during those conversations. Go ahead and RSVP as you're able. I know people probably don't have a lot of plans in March, but go ahead and get it on your calendar. And then I will start to pull together a kind of outreach plan for the different groups we just talked through for both focus groups and digital surveys. And I'll also draft a digital survey for us to look at together next week. So that way we can hopefully get the ball rolling on getting out invitations and rolling out the survey sooner rather than later. We can do the flyer design at NDC. And I think for the focus groups, it probably makes sense also to do like an Eventbrite page just to get folks RSVP'd and know who's coming. And we can use that little flyer design as the banner for Eventbrite. Yeah, any other thoughts before we wrap up or anything that feels pressing that we didn't get to?
Yeah, I just have a question for the focus groups. Are we going to hold them virtually, like via Zoom, or are we going to hold them in person somewhere? Because we need to.
Great question. Great question. It's just tough because like attendance wise, Zoom is always easier. But I think the conversation could be richer and just a, overall better experience if we do them in person. I think it would be great. I don't know how you think this might go over, Jessica, but would Riversdale House be willing to host something like that?
I was just thinking the same thing.
So if we did some in person, I think it would be great if we could kind of move them around the community, like since there will be several. But Riversdale certainly makes a lot of sense. I would love to invite everyone to Town Hall, but it is now finally under construction. So there's lots of equipment moving, but maybe even the elementary school would allow us to hold a meeting. That would be, I think, very well attended. Riversdale would be great. I'm just trying to think. We could do all sorts of different things, but I think the best thing to do is if it's not going to be just at one location, then try to spread it out throughout the community so it's easier and people are able to attend.
Okay. Maybe we can revisit the question of where when we meet next week. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was great. I feel like we've got a good path forward and really looking forward to kind of jumping back into this work. So hopefully see most of you, all of you. Well, like Rush, we won't have you, but we'll be dreaming of your Italian meals together.
I'll be thinking of all of you while I'm there.
I'm sure you will, yeah. But yeah, let's keep things going next week. And Melissa, I will be in touch with you probably before the meeting for next week, and we can just figure out how to keep things moving between our little working group.
Cool. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. I will upload our recording to the Google Drive that I'm keeping all of our meeting notes in and stuff. And If anyone who wasn't able to come wants to watch this fascinating hour and a half of conversation, they're welcome to do that.
Thank you, Carol.
Yes, thanks everyone. Thanks
great.
so much. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
Good night.
Good night. Meryl, I just wanted to, do you have just a second to chat? I wanted to just make sure that we were giving advance notice to the community and making sure that everyone had the opportunity to be part of the meetings because they are public meetings. And my idea was perhaps to do the draft timeline that you created and put it on the section of the website that we created for like the town seal redesign, and just, you know, make it accessible as much as possible to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, just like the posting of the agendas and things like that, just making
Yeah.
sure that we cover all of those things and everybody has the opportunity to participate.
Absolutely.
I think you did amazing work today, like amazing work. Like I honestly was not sure how we were going to pull all the pieces together. And it was like, and also, by the way, I wasn't trying to throw a wrench into the dates. I just know that like the town's platform, like the Zoom platform is used by all those other groups. So I'm like, I can't hold two at the same time, but if you'll set the meetings up, then we should be fine.
Yeah.
Through your account.
No, I think it'll be great. We'll like meet again in a week, just kind of like keep people thinking about it, which kind of achieves what we were talking about last week, which is like just getting it on people's minds a little bit more. And then I think, you know, the focus groups will be like yet another touch point. So I feel like the momentum's definitely gonna just keep cranking.
And so my office handles all the communication platforms. So anything that you need from the town, we can put it out, we can blast it out, anything you need. So just let me know. We'll take a look once you do the outreach component for next week, the little plan that you were working on. We can see where those would fit best, because some of it, like I said, the town crier is really popular, but it's monthly, right? So it's got to be a month in advance. So that makes it hard. The other thing I just wanted to ask, one more thing is, we do these things called community conversations on Saturday mornings. We've been doing them via Zoom. And I wondered if we could do one where you just talk about the same thing that you talked about today, the process. And so people know what's coming and what, you know, what to expect. Is that okay? Like,
absolutely.
Maybe we do it like the first one in November sometime. And then I think people won't have missed anything.
Absolutely. And that way, you know, we'll have the digital survey created by then. So we can just say, you know, if you aren't able to participate in a focus group or not interested, but want to, you know, give feedback, here's an avenue.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. And we'll chat later on this week. Okay.
Yes. We'll be in touch, and I'll see you next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks, Jessica. Take care.
Bye.